Hi, and welcome to another episode of Google Apps Script Office Hours. I'm Eric Kalita, and with me today we have Jan, and we're both on the AppScript DevRel team, Developer Relations. And yeah, we hold these weekly office hours to give you updates on AppScript and answer any questions you guys have. So let's get started.
Okay.
So I think we're going to start with the release notes for the last release of the AppScript that we've pushed out. Do you want to cover this?
Sure. So, and you can find these from developers.google.com/apps-script. There's release notes linked there. So this was from July 26th. And we made some improvements, and we're actually continuing to make more, so you'll see more of these come out in the near future, to improve the speed of handling large batches of data in ScriptDb. So when you're using Save Batch, we are trying to speed up the processing of saving those large batches of data. We've made some progress there.
Yeah, if you haven't used ScriptDB yet, that's the new storage solution built into AppScript, which is a JavaScript object store, and it's easily and simply accessible from right in the script itself. So if you haven't played around with that yet, take a look. It's getting faster by the day.
Yes, definitely. We also, one of the script templates that show up on the welcome screen when you open up script.google.com, we fixed an error in the Gmail script template. So if you've been having some unexpected results from that one, that's fixed now. We also, there was an issue with ScriptDB where sometimes if you were saving an object that had an empty, it was causing errors. That's been fixed now as well.
And was that also related to project properties?
Somewhat related.
Somewhat
So
related,
the issues with project properties for empty, I think it was empty property keys,
yeah.
Was fixed slightly before this.
Okay.
So that's resolved now too.
Great.
We also added support for chat within the script editor. So now if you're collaborating with somebody else, so if you and someone else or multiple people are editing the script, you'll notice on the right-hand side there will be a panel where you can chat with the other collaborators who are currently active on that script. So that's pretty exciting. This is similar to the chat that you would see if you're in a document or a spreadsheet. You can do that now within your scripts.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great things about scripts is that since the editor and all the code is hosted on Google servers, collaborating between different people writing scripts is really simple. And now with the chat, you can make sure that people are synced up when they're working on a script together.
Make things a lot faster. So there was an issue where, for a short period of time, scripts were not being copied when you copied a site. That's resolved now. So now when you copy a site, as expected, the scripts associated with the original site will come with it. We also added autocomplete for libraries. So if you have a library included in development mode, autocomplete will work for that library now. So we added that feature, which should make it much simpler to develop against your own libraries before you're ready to make them out there for the world.
Because in libraries in general, you're creating versions of your library that are stable. And when you're using a library, you pick a version. But when you flip on development mode, now all of a sudden you're using the latest code, even if it's not saved to a version. So when you're doing building new features in libraries and testing them out, this makes it a little bit easier.
For sure. There was a problem with set value in the date picker widget. That's been fixed now. We also added remove methods to UI instance, so now you can remove widgets such as panels or other elements from your UI instance. That should help you clean up a lot on some of these interfaces. Instead of just having to hide everything, you can actually remove them now, so that's great. Long time coming. We also added support for Google Analytics via the Analytics service. I think I gave a teaser on this last week, but it's there now, the documentation there, and then two things that we just added actually since then that we haven't quite added to the release notes yet, but we have added updated documentation for the BigQuery service, and also yesterday we added support for version 1.5 of the prediction API. So those are all there under the Google API Services section. They're all the ones that you have to enable first on the API console.
Yeah.
But those are all there now.
I think in general, those services in AppScript mirror very closely the services that you would use outside of AppScript, right?
That's correct.
If you're
They're
using
very
them
similar.
directly via the Java library or the Python library. Yeah. So it's basically, if you've already been using some of these other Google services in different code you've written, you can actually kind of use them very, very similar methods and use cases inside of AppScript now.
Okay, so I think that's it for release notes.
Yeah, so I guess now we can, I know we have some people here in the Hangout, or at least one person here in the Hangout. Hey Josh, you want to join back in and chat?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
Thank you. Some exciting features coming along. I'm going to keep Bill's feet to the fire. And this is, if you don't know the history of this, I came to these first, and he came, and he's actually a developer. I'm just a wannabe, and right now a funder of developers, and so I like to kind of know what's going on. So one of the things I'd like to do, I have a really old version of a CRM, Goldmine. It's about 10 years old now, and it's limping along. And I've built kind of another silo doing something related to customer management in spreadsheets, right? And I've done a lot of reporting on that, and I did a lot of pivot tables and things to pull reports out, really wonky stuff until I saw ScriptDB not ScriptDB, but GAS and what it can do. Now I'm starting to think that I want to move my data into ScriptDB. I'm looking at about 500,000 records and probably 35 attributes of each record, so a healthy amount of data.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is when if I move totally into the GAS ScriptDB world, I've built a lot of reports that really require this data be in spreadsheets. I mean, I only know how to build reports off of spreadsheets, and I've done some kludgy stuff to make it work, but it works right now, right? Is there going to be a way for, would it be possible to store my data in ScriptDB and kind of automatically pull it out once a day into spreadsheets and still have all the reporting that I currently have?
So possibly, and you're talking about Google Spreadsheets, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have about 500,000 records, I'm guessing that you have more than one spreadsheet, yes?
Well, actually, so I have two different kind of silos right now, and one's kind of being managed in Goldmine and doesn't have any reporting, and it's really outdated, and the other one is just a whole different set of records. But yeah, actually, yeah, I'm sorry, it is. Both silos are about 500,000, so maybe together there'd be some overlap. But yeah, so right now I only knew how to, you can only pull 50 imports at a time, right? So because I have that 500,000 spread out amongst 70 branches, what I had to do was create container pages. So basically so there's a spreadsheet with a data page, right? And it could have anywhere from 8 to 15,000 records. Mm-hmm. I create pivot tables, summaries of that using pivot tables. And I have about 4 important summaries per each one of those 70 spreadsheets. Because I can't pull 70 times 4 into a grand, total sheet, what I did is create data pages which pull 4 summaries down into one page, and then now I've created just one pull for that, right? One import range. And I know I'm out of GASA world a little bit, but it all ties back. And then from there, I have one data page for each of the 70 branches. I then from there kind of break my 70 branches into 3 regions, and I pull down a third of 70 into a summary page. And so I keep summarizing summary pages. Mm-hmm. Okay. And believe it or not, it's crazy, but it's working right now. Okay. It's not very elegant, it's not very efficient, but it's pretty impressive in its inelegance. Okay. But I can't lose that right now. I can't, change the tire while the car is rolling right now. But I definitely think that ScriptDB, first of all, tell me it can handle the volume of data that I have, right?
Well, that was one of the things I wanted to look into, because I know we do publish a limit on how much data can be stored in a ScriptDB.
So I think there are limits on certain things. So there's limits on the number of records you can get back in a single query, which is not the same as saying you can only, because I think you can get 50,000 records back in one single query.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can only store 50,000 records in the DB. You can just only get a 50,000 item snapshot at any given time. Mm-hmm. But there are some limitations, I think, on the size of the item. Mm-hmm. But I don't know that we have a larger aggregate limit on the total size of the database.
I thought I
think
heard
we
that
have to
discussed.
check.
Yeah, I think we have to check that though. So
Okay.
and the thing is that it's a little difficult to calculate if that is there. If I'm remembering that limit correctly, that there is one that exists because
It's a size limitation.
Size,
so
yeah.
it's some number of,
like
I'm
megabytes,
Yeah,
gigabytes.
I think
or
it might be
something.
some small number of hundreds of megabytes.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
It's actually in the documentation,
Yeah.
in the FAQ section for ScriptDB.
But it's not number of entries and number of attributes. It really depends on how much data is in those entries and attributes.
Right.
So it can be a little difficult to calculate. I would say, 500,000 and times some, it's like 30 attributes or something like that.
Yeah.
You're probably getting, I don't know, maybe in the range. We have to do some number crunching, I guess, to figure it out. But
So at that point, it'll just become, is it efficient enough? I mean, is it fast enough?
yeah, or can you fit it all, right? Because if you did this,
Well, that's the first question. And then
yeah.
if I can fit it all, is it reasonable? I mean, is it working with that volume?
So you're going to have
Because it's
some
not just
interplay
yeah.
between interacting with the spreadsheet service to basically pull data from ScriptDB and stick it into spreadsheets.
Mhm.
And you can do some optimizing there to save the data to the spreadsheet in the most efficient way. If you have tons and tons and tons of data and you're doing this all at once, we do also have a script execution time limit, so where any single execution of a script can only run for 6 minutes. I'm just guessing off the top of my head, if you're trying to put 500,000 records into a spreadsheet, it's probably going to run into that limit, so you would have to implement some sort of batching or chunking of those writes.
Well,
spreadsheet.
I'm not going to put 500,000 in any one spreadsheet because of
Okay.
the same problem I have right now, right? The spreadsheets themselves can't handle it. Forget
That's also
ScriptDB,
true, yes.
right? So what I'm imagining is keeping the exact same spreadsheet structure that I have right now and just populating those spreadsheets with automatic pulls from ScriptDB.
Yeah, it certainly, I think, is a possible solution. I was actually thinking about something similar today, where you keep your data in ScriptDB and then you output segments of it to spreadsheets to kind of expose the data to a person, because there's no UI for ScriptDB, right? You can't browse around it. So you could use a spreadsheet as a way to kind of expose the data to humans, or in your case, maybe expose it to all these other processes you have set up.
Wow, I'm flattered. I'm having similar thoughts to
that said,
but it's because people can work with spreadsheets, right? They can work with, well, I was going to say they can work with pivot tables, but actually most people don't, which is, since I started working, I'm like, wow, I needed to learn this a long time ago.
yeah.
But they have their limitations too.
I was going to say the one, and I think in past Hangouts you've come and asked about data storage options, and I remember that's topics that's come up before. And the one thing I would say about ScriptDB, the thing that makes it different and maybe not appropriate depending upon all of your use cases, is that it's not about aggregation, right? You cannot say, give me the sum of all of these fields, or do counts. It's not a relational database that gives you that kind of aggregation ability. And it sounds like that's what you're using pivot tables for. So if you're doing if you're trying to take large amounts of data and compress it into summaries, you cannot do that natively inside ScriptDB.
Right.
You would have to either do the
yourself.
math and code, export it to a spreadsheet, and have the pivot table do it, etc. Versus there are other data storage solutions like the fusion tables, that do allow for creating views on data that summaries and such. So or relational databases. So if a lot of what you're doing or all of what you're doing is trying to create summaries from large amounts of data, then maybe ScriptDB doesn't provide you as much value. I think ScriptDB is where you have a lot of people that are going to open a record, edit a record, save a record. Those records are complex objects and maybe linked to each other, and there are different types. I think when you're more focused on an individual entity instead of the summaries, that could be a better place for ScriptDB. But I mean, I think it depends really on some of your use cases. But that's just something to keep in mind, is that ScriptDB itself is never going to be able to give you a total of some field across all your entities. You'll have to do that math on your own.
Okay, and one last more specific question. ScriptDB, last I knew, didn't handle dates very natively. Is that in the works? Because that would be a huge impediment to
That is still the case. So it does. You can't save the native JavaScript date object. Instead, you can either save a string representation of it, or if you're actually going to be doing some sort of arithmetic or stuff with it, then you can save the numeric timestamp. But yes, that is still a limitation that we hope to not have as a limitation in the future, but currently it is.
And dates are just one of those things that are tricky, right? I think one of the engineers brought it up when he was talking about it. Like, if you create the date and you're in Eastern time, and then what if you try to read it again and now you're in Pacific time? And, it gets complicated where, when you save a timestamp, that timestamp is true everywhere, right? It's the number in milliseconds since 1970, and that's going to be true no matter where you are in the world. So I think it's simpler this way, but definitely requires a little bit more work. And I think we're looking at ways to make it easier to use, but without causing all sorts of weird confusion around time zones.
Okay, thank you.
So we have Jim join in the interim. You there, Jim?
I think you might be on mute here. But we do have several questions on the moderator page we can jump over to.
Yeah, that's okay.
If you'd like. Okay.
Yeah, so if you're watching this, every week we have a moderator page linked off of our developers.google.live show page where you can ask questions ahead of time in case you can't attend live or would rather just type them out.
Okay, it looks like we have 6 questions here. We went ahead and added in some responses to some of these ahead of time, but we'll go through each of them as much as we have time for anyway. I'll take the first one, and then we can trade off if you want.
Rock and roll.
So the first one's actually related to ScriptDb, and it's kind of similar to the question what we were just talking about. So, is there any way to save large spreadsheets to ScriptDB, something like 13 times 10,000 cells? So using the method from the documentation, it exceeds the execution time for the script, and by saving the spreadsheet into one big object, it throws a data storage error. So I'm not entirely sure which specific method from the documentation you're referring to here. One thing that would help you, probably if you're not already using it, is there's a save batch method that will do this more efficiently than if you were just doing save in a loop on all the individual records. Now, doing that could still run into that execution time limit. So what you can do there is you could set some sort of chunking. So you can say, I'm going to just do 1,000 records at a time, or whatever you find is going to be a safe number that will allow you to get it done within 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then, set some sort of flag. You can use script properties for this to say, I got through row whatever, and then pick up from there and have your script kind of keep going until all the data is in the database. Additionally, I was speaking to one of the engineers about this morning, and they're still doing some more work that should actually solve the issue that you're getting with the data storage error when you try to save one gigantic object. There's definitely some work we're doing behind the scenes there to make that work better and work more consistently with these really, really large objects that have a lot of attributes on them. So in the hopefully near future, that should be a smoother option for you to use as well.
Yeah, but now the power of ScriptDB, I think, really comes from its querying abilities, mm-hmm. where you can say, give me all the records that match this or match that. Right. And if you have one giant object, you lose that. Yeah. So I think you're going to want to look towards doing lots of individual, maybe one row is one object in ScriptDB instead of one giant object.
Right. So combining save batch with chunking, if you still need it, is probably the recommended way to go for now.
Oh, great. So the next question we have here is this one here, right?
Yes.
So I have an HTML table, and I want to sort the table by clicking the column headings. How can I do this with something like jQuery's library table sort or sort table? I don't see anywhere I can call the library in a folder, or is there a different method? So you've already looked into this a little bit.
Yeah, actually. So if I understood the question correctly, I looked at the table sorter library, and if you go to that page, you can download the zip file that has all the related files that you need, the JavaScript and everything else. While it's true that in an AppScript project you can't just stick the JavaScript and the CSS files in there and then reference them, mm-hmm. you have a couple options. So if you have somewhere you would want to maybe host those JavaScript files, I was thinking you could possibly even do it as like an attachment in Google Sites, mm-hmm. as one kind of quick and dirty way of doing it. And then you can reference in the script tag, you could do source equals and then point to the URL of where you have that file hosted, even if it is as a Sites attachment. That's one option. The other would be, if it's not too terribly much code that it makes you go crazy to paste it all in, you can inline that code from the library just into your script. So in your HTML file within AppScript, you can just open up a script tag, paste in all of that library, and then get on with your coding. So those are a couple options. I have been hearing some requests where people want to be able to include other types of files and other assets within their AppScript project. If that's something that you would prefer, then be sure to raise that in the issue tracker so we can get a sense for how many people are looking for that sort of functionality.
Yeah. One more thing I was going to say about the scripts is that the way that the HTML service and the apps that are served from it work is it uses a technology called Caja, which is kind of inspects and modifies your HTML and JavaScript to make sure that nothing fishy is going on. So not every script you find in the world is going to work with Caja straight off the bat. Caja will go in there, poke around, and if it's doing anything that's dangerous, it could potentially remove that part of the code or block it from working. So, for libraries like jQuery libraries, jQuery itself is supported by Caja. They've verified that. It's a popular library. But for a lot of derivative, like plugin libraries, if those haven't been explicitly tested with Caja, they may not work, and you'll have to do some testing there.
And if you want to get a sense for that without having to write your script first, if you search for Caja Playground, there is an easy tool you can use to check and see if something will, I think we call it cajole, if it will cajole properly or not, so that you can save yourself a little trouble up front.
Want to take the next one?
Oh, sure.
You were going to answer it now.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So I have a UI form that's pulling in a list of students from the sheet. So I've coded it to loop one at a time and add it to the drop-down list. If I have over 300 students, it'll take 20 seconds help. So someone else has actually added in a comment here, which I'm going to read through.
Better.
Oh, and look, and this is actually a good suggestion here. So one fast way to solve this is to load the list of the students into a cache. So we have a cache service. Seems like this would make sense for this, especially if your list of students is not going to be changing a lot on the fly, like from any one use of the app to another. Mm-hmm. So you can pull in this list of students, save it using the cache service for as long as you choose to save it. I think the default is 25 minutes, maybe.
It's something longer like that, but yeah, you can even specify, I think, down to the second.
Yeah, or even up to 6 hours, I think.
Yeah.
And then that could be much, much faster on subsequent accesses to that list of students. So it would take a little bit of time for the first time you pulled it from the spreadsheet. And instead of looping one at a time, make sure basically that you pull it from the spreadsheet using get values instead of a loop where you're doing get value. That'll be much, much faster too. And that should help you out. The other option here, they were saying to maybe store those records in ScriptDb instead of spreadsheets. That may save you some time too. I think it is generally somewhat faster to pull things from ScriptDb than to pull from spreadsheet cells. So that, for 300 records, you probably aren't going to get a huge difference, but I would say cache service is the way to go to look at this.
All right, so the next one we have in here is there a way to apply query to sheets in a spreadsheet, want to join two tables? So I'm not entirely clear on what this means. I know there is a query function built into Google Spreadsheets that allows you to look over a range and kind of filter them down. And AppScript does have the ability to set formulas in cells, so you could use AppScript to build these formulas for you. However, you can't natively call spreadsheet functions in AppScript, so you can't call in your code the query method. What you could do is set that formula into a cell, but you can't actually call it and get the result back. But I think as we've talked about before with data options, there's a lot of different ways to store data, get data, merge data in code. So there are a lot of possibilities to go about it. It kind of just depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I would say for this one, if we're not totally understanding what you're asking for, post this on Stack Overflow with some example code of what you're trying to do, and we or someone else can probably help you find a solution.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's an XLS file in Google Drive. I need to convert it automatically to a spreadsheet by AppScript or else by a Chrome extension. So I posted a link to some manual instructions for doing this. I think if you right-click in Drive on one of these files, then there's the option to basically turn it into a related Google document. I don't believe, and correct me if you can think of a way of doing this, but I don't think we have a way of directly doing this in AppScript. We kind of have a way of getting data from a Google spreadsheet into some other format, such as a PDF, but we don't have a way today of going the opposite direction. So that would make a great feature request. So please do add it in the issue tracker, which you can get to from our documentation.
Yeah, we've got some new ones here. So we have, how do you change text in a text box without reloading UI? So I'm assuming this is the UI app, and as your answer here is addressed, it is possible to do this using client handlers. So, and even in server handlers to a degree. So when you're doing using UI app, essentially what you're doing is you're modifying it in your script and then returning that app back again, whether it be in the doGet or in a handler class. And that does, if you're using a server handler, there is a trip to the server, some calculation takes place, and then the data is updated on the client. Even still, it's not a full page refresh, as you would see like maybe in other web apps. But if you use client handlers, it's even faster because there's no round trip to the server that needs to take place. So as the sample code that Jan posted here, you can actually do some set text in a client handler to modify some of the text box. So that's something you want to look into for a super speedy kind of text box modification.
Right. And I missed if you said this. They don't. Client handlers won't necessarily work on every single type of widget,
Yes.
but they'll work on quite a few of them. So.
And they don't have every option.
Right.
Yeah. But if you want to do some simple things like she showed here about making things visible or invisible, changing some style properties, I think, changing the text in this case, those are possible in client handlers.
Okay. And we have one last question here. So why aren't you using a Chromebook? So fair question. My Chromebook is at my desk, and actually you can't see this, but if I were to turn the camera around, you'd see we've got a couple Chromebooks set up in here too. So we use lots of different computers. Fair question. Maybe next week we'll have a Chromebook set up here. Actually, we will. I'm getting a nod. We are going to have a Chromebook set up here next week. So.
Well, wait. I have an incredibly important question now.
Okay.
How do I go about getting one of those stickers?
Oh my gosh, if I could just tell you how many people ask me that, and I don't know
I
the
bet.
answer. I can't even find another one of these. I don't know where they come from. So unfortunately, I don't know how to get more. But if I ever find out, I will let you know in a future hangout.
Please do.
Okay, I should just take the sticker away because it's too tempting.
I'm wondering if it would peel off.
Not well. Once it peels
No,
off, it's
fair
done.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It is fantastic.
Thanks.
So we've had a number of people join the Hangout while we've been going through the moderator. In the couple minutes we have left, does anyone else who's live here want to ask a question?
Oh, you know what? I just realized it's at 11 o'clock, not 11:30. That explains why you're just about done. Hope it was a great hangout. Actually, yeah, I do have a question. It was about issue tracker and Stack Flow or Stack Overflow, and how do you prioritize those in terms? I noticed like on issue tracker I've been on, and Jan, thank you. I saw that you triaged a couple of things that I put on there. How do you decide? Because I noticed there was a lot of things on issue tracker that don't actually have any sort of response from anyone. How do you decide what to respond to and what not to respond to?
So the goal with the issue tracker is for us to get to every single issue on there. Sometimes it may take longer for some issues than others, but once we set something to triage or feedback requested state, it means that we've looked at it and we've either tried to take action on it, but we need more information, or we've raised it internally. That's basically what the triage status means. If something's still in new status, we probably have looked at it and we just haven't yet figured out where we need to or how we need to raise it internally. And then some issues where it turns out something might not be feasible for us to fix either now or in the near future, we may close something out and state that and maybe give you a workaround instead.
That makes sense. I was just wondering though, because it seemed like kind of back a ways there was some issues that didn't actually have anything going back quite a ways. That's what I was just kind of wondering about with some of those older ones that maybe are been back a while. And recognizing you have a difficult time, lots of information flowing at you, but
well, if you've been on some of those really old issues, I've actually started, every day we kind of handle all the new stuff that comes in. Mm-hmm. But I've also kind of, as another project, gone back in time and made sure that anything that fell through the cracks gets an answer now. So if you've been on some of those old ones, I've been replying to them too. So I think eventually we're going to meet in the middle and everything will be either triaged or feedback requested or something else. So. Yeah.
Or fresh, right. And I understand it's not the same day. I was just kind of curious about that. And then I guess the other little question sort of is subsequent. So once you've triaged it, do you have a framework for prioritizing and deciding which enhancement defects? Obviously, you decide how defective is it. But in terms of enhancements, how do you decide, or what's your process? So your developer relations. So you've got this enhancement that you think looks interesting. What's your internal process for taking that back to the engineers and deciding how important is it? Where does it fall in the whole framework?
It's a good question. So there's a few parts to it, and one of them I can definitely tell you is the number of stars on that issue tracker. So every time somebody wants to follow an issue, they can star it, and we can see the number of stars, and that's a good indicator of interest to us for how many people are looking for a particular type of feature. Other ones may already fall into some roadmap that we've defined, and so we're like, oh, that we're definitely already planning to do that. But for ones where it's like, oh, that's a great idea, let's get an understanding for how many people are looking for this type of functionality. The stars on the issue tracker is one way that we do that.
And the product team here at Google for AppScript has a tough time because there are way more great ideas than I think there are hours in the day to implement. So, I think we do a great job, and the team does a great job here of trying to figure out what's most important to people externally, what's going to get a lot of good work done, what's going to enable great new uses of AppScript.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what's the mission of Google AppScript?
So it's kind of a twofold thing. So one is to allow you to extend what you can do, and I'm talking fast because we're actually a little over time, but I want to wrap up your question here for you. That's okay. So one of them is to allow you as a developer to really easily code and extend what you can do with Google products, specifically a lot of the Google Apps products, and make them more useful to you and kind of tie all those services together. Another is just to make it easy for anybody to build code in the browser. So you're building this stuff, you're just coding in the browser, it runs on Google servers, and you can, today you can build web apps really easily with AppScript and deploy them. You don't have to worry about hosting. So it's all about making it a simple way for you to do all of these things. So, and on that note, we are quite a bit over time. So thank you, everybody.
Sorry.
And no problem at all. It's a good question. And we'll see you all next week. And next week, I think we're going to be at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time from a Chromebook.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.